Welcome back to another episode of Can't Take Your Call Right Now with me, Lauren Reeves.
And me, Harry Monkhouse.
And it is Series 2, Episode 5. And we've got a guest again, guys. And I think most of you will all know this person because I like to say she's pretty famous. She probably won't say that. Yeah, in the world of like tech sales, recruitment, I think she's up there. We've got the absolute legend that is Sophie Allen. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. So I'm Sophie. I am an SDR recruiter. That's probably what I am most known for on LinkedIn. I work with SaaS companies and I help them hire SDRs. And I work with early careers people, industry movers, graduates, experienced SDRs, and help them land roles in tech sales.
You can promote the shit out of your company, by the way.
Do enough of everybody a break from that for now.
Sophie, do you remember interviewing me years and years ago? I remember this. It's like
I remember thinking you were a really big character.
I was terrified. You were so scary. I remember you were like,
really?
Yeah, because you were just very blunt. And I think it was the first time I'd ever experienced someone being so blunt with me. And I remember walking out and I was like, that was one of the scariest moments of my entire life. I was like, what am I signing up for? So funny, yeah.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, that is something I pride myself on. The bluntness. I always try and do it in a nice way, but I do say to candidates, do you want the sugar-coated version or the real version? Because I think if you give people the real version, it actually helps them more than giving them the sugar-coated version. So yes, I was blunt then and I'm still quite blunt now.
But Lauren, we were discussing this, like when we were talking about like some of the feedback that we give as hiring managers. Like I'm very, very to the point. Like, would you like some feedback? Okay, it went well, or it actually went really poorly, and hey, these are the things you need to work on in order to be able to be successful. Whereas Lauren, you were saying that sometimes you're a bit softer with it, and then you're like, I kind of deliberate with it. Whereas
I've always struggled if I'm on an interview and I know it's a bad interview and someone closes me out at the end and they're like, so how did it go? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, bad. And I always worry, like, how would I say that in a kind way? Because like I want to be honest, but I don't want to be mean because I'm not a mean person. But Harry said like, and I actually have taken it on board and I was like, I'm definitely going to do this next time I'm interviewing, it happens, is like, are you happy for me to give you some honest feedback? And I actually like them to go, yes, I am. And then I can be like, because normally what I always say is I go, if it's a bad interview, I go, I never like to give feedback on calls. I always like to
and then when the candidate calls me after, and then Lauren said she's going to let me know, I'm like, right, that's unsuccessful then.
Yeah, that's a no. Because I'm like, great, really loved this. Yeah. So this, I mean, you always knew. You always knew.
Yeah. I always think if the candidate's invested their time, we owe it to them as interviewers to give them something constructive. And as long as it's delivered in a nice way, like you say, and based on their ability to actually do the job that you are interviewing them for, I think it's more helpful than unhelpful. But sometimes if I'm speaking to somebody and I think actually they're not going to take it well, then I don't do it because I don't want to get into that. But 9 times out of 10, I'll tell them straight.
Yeah, I'll always give feedback afterwards. Like I would always message like, this is why they've said no, this is what they need to work on. But no, I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get much better on the interview. But yeah, I think that's something that I always look at people in awe when they're very good at being very straightforward. I just say, oh God, how are you not scared? It gets me so nervous. I'm with my team. I'm like, that was a joke. What are you doing? But terrifying.
So Sophie, take us back. So we'll go back right to the start of your career. So you've actually been in recruitment all of your career, pretty much. And actually, would I be right in saying grad specifically almost for all of your career as well?
Yes. Back then, well, I've been in it for 13 years now. Back then it was telemarketing executive and not SDR. The job that I was recruiting for, not as glamorous because there weren't as many, SaaS wasn't really a thing, and all of the like VC funded exciting companies didn't really exist. But yes, I've always done like entry level sales into tech companies. as the type of recruitment that I've done. So I've been in the industry for a very, very long time, and it horrifies me now when I have to ask candidates for their date of birth when I'm doing contracts, because I used to be the same age as them, and now there's some of them are born in like 2005. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I feel so old.
It's like that. It's like that trend that I continuously see. It's like, what's your date of birth? And they're like 2002, and it's like absolutely fine. And then as soon as someone says 19, it's like a dinosaur background comes
Yeah,
through. And it's just like, oh man, like as if, as
yeah,
if.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
horrifying.
I think this with the team, I mean, like, I'm quite fortunate. I've got a big mix. I've got people that are
Mm.
older than me. I've got some at the same age, some are younger. But the ones that are younger, they'll like say things to me like, I'll be like, oh yeah, like I'm out on Friday, thank God, at the weekend. So it means I've got 2 days to recover. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you don't get it. Like, if I don't have 2 days to recover, I'm still a mess come Monday. Like, I literally prefer a Friday night than a Saturday night. Like, they're
Yeah.
like, you don't get
Yeah,
it. You're 23.
yeah.
Everything is
It
back.
it ca- it
Mm.
catches up on you quick. It catches
Yeah.
up on you quick. So how did you get into recruitment? Why recruitment? Like, because we've spoken on other episodes as part of this
Mm.
series of like the how to break into tech sales, and we'll come on to that because I'd love to hear your opinion on how you think it's best to break into tech. But back then, why recruitment? How did you get into that? How were you breaking into recruitment?
So I was a very naive graduate. They did a drama degree because I just thought that would be an easy subject to do. Went to Manchester because I thought it'd be cool to live in a big city far away from home. Was working in a burger restaurant, and my parents were like, you have done a degree, you need to get yourself like a corporate job. And at the time I was living with somebody who worked in recruitment, and I had no idea what it was, but I just knew that he seemed to enjoy his job and was making good money. So I basically just applied online, went to an assessment center run by the very first company that I worked for, that was for a tech sales job. And at the end of the assessment center, the company, so the recruitment company that were running the assessment center, basically said to me, we're hiring for us. We think you could be really good at recruitment. Do you want a job here? Didn't even think twice, accepted it on the spot. 17K basic, was like an hour commute from my
Woo!
house, 5 days a week in the office.
Flying,
And yeah,
flying.
I just didn't even think twice, just said yes. And then basically it all kind of stemmed from there. That was recruiting, yeah, grads into tech sales, like big companies like Virgin Media, for example.
Yeah.
And that's where I met Elaine, who was my very first boss, the only boss I've ever had, actually. And then from there, she was moving to London to open the London branch of that company that was based in Manchester. I was quickly becoming the top performer. She asked me to go with her. And then it all just kind of like took off from there.
Wow. I had no idea that that's how you met Elaine. I thought Elaine had
Yeah.
gone set up her own company, and then that's how I suppose Venetrix
No.
was started, and then everyone moved over.
Yeah, we both worked for a company based in Manchester. We kind of moved to London together. She was like the head of the London office, and I was the person winning all the clients. And then she left to start her own company, and then I went with her a few months after she started it. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. So talk to us about that rise up into kind of becoming a top biller as part of that. Again, I think that what you'll be talking about is very translatable to people that are in sales as well. There's a lot of key things that probably
Mm.
you did within recruitment that a salesperson should be doing. But are there any kind of key things that you go, actually, I did those things and that's why I started rising to the top, or I worked harder at this bit, or
So I think timing was everything. And I think this is something that I speak to candidates quite a lot about. I think the time that you join a business can have a really big impact on your success in that business. I'll talk mainly about Venetrix because that's like the more recent than the previous company. But when I joined
Mhm.
Venetrix, I was the first proper salesperson, which meant I was essentially the only person reaching out to clients, going to meetings, winning all the customers. And I think that played a huge part. I think if I'd have joined a company that already had 10 other people doing that job, the kind of progression and exposure would have been a bit slower. I think honestly it comes down to the type of person that you are. The rejection of recruitment never really fazed me that much. Not winning really annoyed me because I was really competitive. So I always liked to win, to be the best, to be the person, winning all the best clients. But the actual rejection part of, cold calling, trying to win customers it was just something that I kind of shrugged off and dealt with quite well. And I think the other thing, which maybe is a little bit taboo, is I was really money motivated. So, and I don't know where that came from because both my parents are doctors, they're not business people. And we always had like a good upbringing, but never, I never had like role models in my life that were like chasing deals and winning business and like earning commission. But once I got a taste for that, that just became like something that I absolutely couldn't let go of. Because I think especially when you move to London as a graduate and you're paying rent and you want to, go to all the nice restaurants, buy yourself nice things, once you start earning commission, it makes a huge impact on the life that you live outside of work. So I would say it was probably a combination of just like the competitive nature, really loving earning commission, and the timing that I joined the company that helped me be really successful.
It's super interesting, and I think I totally agree with like the money aspect. Again, I still when I speak to my mum about it, my mum's like, it's such a taboo subject. But actually, I think younger generation, I think they're so open. Like, I can't believe how forthcoming they are with some of the conversations. But I think you're totally right. You start to build up a little bit of that momentum, and it becomes very, very addictive. I think that's probably why we're all sat here today. Just going back to what you said around joining the company at the right time, because you've actually just said there that you were kind of the first bum on seat in regards to being in that kind of AE slash, I don't know what you'd call it in recruitment, but someone that is doing necessarily the closing. I look at that and that's extremely risky, no, right? Because you're actually, and I know you're saying you're getting a lot of exposure, but there's a higher risk of failure because, again, maybe the company hasn't been around for a long time.
Yeah.
When you translate that to kind of what you speak to about BDRs and SDRs when they're looking maybe at their first company or people that you have maybe gone and done a little bit of sales experience and you're now placing them at their next gig, what tends to be the advice that you give them around what is a good company or what is an exciting company to go and be looking for?
So I think you can never be 100% sure when you join an early stage company. I am the type of person that likes risk. So I'm very much a just say yes and do it and worry about how you do it later. And I know a lot of people aren't like that. So to give you an example, I spoke to a girl on Friday that's looking for her next SDR role. And she just loves structure. She wants really good training. So she's not the right kind of candidate for an early stage startup because she's just not going to get that there. So I think it does depend on the person. I think what I advise candidates to look at, and also what I looked at back then, which was maybe slightly easier for me because I already knew Elaine. So I had full faith in us as a team that we could make it work. But I think the caliber of the leadership. So where have they been before? And also, what just like gut feel do you get when you speak to them? Do you feel like this is somebody that I can really like back and rely on? Number two, the funding. So I think especially with early stage companies, you want to look at like who are the investors, how much have they put in, what other companies have they backed to give you a bit more confidence around like the roadmap of the organization and the runway. I think the biggest thing is product market fit. So even if it's an early stage company, like what is the problem that they're solving? What has the like early adoption of the product been? Who are the customers? How many are there? What's the average order value? How many are they retaining? I think that's something that's really important to look at. And I think when I joined Venatrix, for example, I knew that like companies needed people to help them hire salespeople. I trusted Elaine, and it was also backed by an investor that's James Khan from Dragon's Den, so that just held a bit of weight as well. But yeah, they're the three things.
Nice. When you're also, from like your standpoint, looking for which companies to work for, are those also the sort of things that you're looking at as well? Because I imagine that you're not going to say yes to hiring for every company either, because there's obviously things that matter to you.
Yeah, most of mine come inbound, so I'm really lucky in that regard. But I do get, if I'm prospecting, I get pretty much all of my prospects from a website called EU Startups. which is basically a publication that announces every company that's just got funding in Europe. And then they're the companies that I'll go after because they feel like safe bets. I've spoken to a lot of very early stage companies since I started my business trampoline, where I just think like this just feels like a bit too early, messy, chaotic. It sounds like the SDR is going to be the one finding out what the product market fit is, and that's not a good dynamic to put somebody on in really early in their career. So yeah, I'm looking for those things as well.
So I have to say, there's a lot of points in there I think very much align on. When you say, just coming back to like your first point around kind of like the people. So you said about like their backgrounds and stuff like that. Just talk to me a little bit more about that, because again, I think, of course, me and Lauren talk about this a lot. Like the vibe of like the manager or the person that you're trying to hire is critical. But is there a particular thing that you tend to see or you look for within like the managers? And is it just the manager you're looking at, or is it the people above the manager who you're going to be reporting into?
It depends on the size of the company because some startups you just have the founder and the sales team.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that depends, but I'm looking at things like if they are a sales leader, for example, what tenure have they had in the previous companies they've worked for? Are they somebody that's
Hmm.
jumped around a lot? The like just feel that I get from them when I meet them on Zoom, do they feel like a really credible person that knows what they're talking about, that cares about the development of SDRs, that has got some good like processes and playbooks in place? Are they like diligent and are they really detailed when I'm asking them questions?
Hmm.
I think you just get that gut feel about people when you speak to them. And then with regards to the founders, a lot of them have come from like prestigious backgrounds, and that's how they've ended up in a situation where they're getting funding from VC. So just looking at things like, you know, where they studied, what they did previously. You know, when I asked them like, why did you start this company? What is the problem that you're solving? Making sure that that's all really solid too.
Yeah. I think definitely, I think the hopping around thing is a big thing. And I think that's
Mm,
probably a thing that a lot of people look at, regardless of whether you're looking at the manager that you're going to be working for or you're an
hiring.
SDR, an AE, yeah, anything when you're moving along. What do you, by the way, what's your definition of like hopping around? How long do you think you need to be somewhere before it's clear?
This could get me in hot water, and it is a bit of a grey area because, like, if you look at, I don't know, there's a lot of people that are doing really well now because they found the right company and they just never
Oh,
found the
100%.
right one previously.
Hmm.
But then sometimes that is a bit of a question mark around like their decision making. But I think if somebody's done like, you know, maximum a year at each place and there's like 6 different places, to me that's quite a hoppy CV and a hoppy background. Whereas
Yeah,
I
you
think,
agree with that. If there was more than like three places within a year of each place,
yeah,
yeah, I think that could be cause for concern.
but sometimes with candidates, because I get so many applications, I'll disregard people just based on short tenures at different companies.
Yeah.
And then I'll see they join a really good SaaS company and stick there for ages. And then I'm like, oh, damn, I should have given that person more of a chance. So
Mm.
I don't think there's a hard and fast rule for it, but just like in general, I think for management especially, you want somebody that's like steady and can stick at something.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
or at
agree.
least you're going to be there for your tenure as much.
Yeah,
Even if they move around like every 18 months, at least if they're at the start, then you know you've probably got 18 months or 2 years with them as part of that.
yeah, exactly.
So we've got loads of other questions around kind of top tips. So you're you specialize in helping BDRs kind of break into tech. So
Hmm.
what are your kind of like top tips? So we've spoken about like the traditional, so you either go through a recruiter, you go through an assessment day, you
Yeah.
apply directly, or you cold call someone in the business and try and get them to refer you in. In your opinion, like what do you see work best for people getting in?
So I think anything can work. I think it depends on the candidate and how good they are at executing the strategy that they choose.
Hmm.
I think without being biased, I do think it really helps if you work with a recruiter. And I don't mean me specifically, but you can work with me if you want to. But I think quite often a recruiter will get you in front of people that you wouldn't be able to get in front of yourself.
Mhm.
And there are always exceptions to the rule. But if you think about, like, when people are applying via companies' websites, for example, or via LinkedIn, there's just so much competition, and a lot of the time your application is just going through like a filter system where if your postcode isn't in the ideal location, for example, your application is just not even considered, or if you don't have relevant experience, your application just isn't considered. Whereas if you're working with a recruiter and their clients trust them, they can have conversations with, hiring managers about why they should meet you. And I think there's been so many candidates that I've placed that, a really good example of this is a guy called Dan that I placed recently, who you actually interviewed, Lauren, had a army background. Do you remember him?
I do remember
Yeah,
Dan.
he's just landed a really good role, but he was really struggling to get in front of companies because he just had a non-traditional background. He'd been in the army for 8 years, went to uni a bit later, just couldn't get through like application screening processes. And but because I backed him, really believed in him, put him forward to a load of companies, now he's got a great job and he's doing really well. So yeah, I think
That's great.
working with a recruiter.
Yeah, just on that, do you find, because again, I've only ever used a recruiter, I think once or twice. What my biggest challenge is justifying cost when you've got a massive talent acquisition team internally. Like that's always my biggest problem as a hiring manager, is trying to justify spending an extra 7-ish, 9, 10, whatever it is, grand to hire someone, maybe through an external recruiter. But I understand that you have access to a larger talent pool that is specialized as part of that. Do you find, though, you have moments with companies where you are competing against people that are applying through like the website and stuff? Or are you, with the relationships that you have, or is it more exclusive in the sense that you are using me for all of the, I don't know, 3 or 4 people that you're actually going to hire?
Yeah, I think if a company decides they're going to work with a recruiter, because that is also time consuming for them, they've got to like, have a constant. When I'm working with a company, I'm like, you'll remember this, Lauren, when we were hiring for Swap, constantly WhatsApping you, constantly slacking you,
Yeah, Sophie's
slapping you
horrible.
with
She used to
candidates.
up all the
So
time.
I think it then becomes like a waste of time if you're meeting candidates from a recruiter and
And going,
yeah, but if a company gets an amazing direct application, then they're obviously not gonna, not interview that person just because they're working with a recruiter. But
yeah,
no, I think companies usually choose one or the other. I think especially with early stage SaaS companies, we typically like seed to Series A to Series B. They, that's when they're kind of like really keen to invest in a recruiter because they just need, reliability. They need to meet profiles quickly. And then typically once they hit Series B, that's when they invest in like a proper talent acquisition team, and maybe they have less need for a recruiter. So they kind of,
yeah.
I would say the companies that I recruit for have like life cycles of working with me loads and loads, and then it might become a bit more sporadic once they've got that internal team.
Yeah, I think
The reason,
as someone that's gone from scrappy Series A to
To
now
scale
Series
up.
B, yeah, in obviously like the quickest amount of time ever as well. One thing that I actually have found quite difficult is going away from agency because of the fact that the internal talent team is still being built out, so there isn't quite the people there, but then there is a talent team that they're like, well, we've got a talent team. And that transition, I think, especially for sales, I think can be really difficult because finding good BDRs is hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard. And like one thing that I always loved, especially working with you, Sophie, was that like I knew that whoever you put in front of me, I knew you vetted. I was like, she's not going to put anything in my candidate. She doesn't think there's a good chance I'm going to like them. Whereas I think that when you are on that internal recruiter piece, it takes a while for the internal recruitment to understand what good
you're
really
looking
looks.
for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whereas obviously, you're an expert at BDR hiring. You know not only what a good BDR looks like, so you've got that ticked. Then you just understand what I look for in a good BDR, and then that's all you source. Whereas internal
Mm.
recruiters are normally hiring for multiple roles, so they kind of have a bit of a glimpse. Yeah, I think that transition over is quite difficult as well, actually. Like as someone
Yeah.
that's literally going through it.
And I think the SDR market moves really quickly. So good candidates aren't on the market for long. They get snapped up very quickly. Typically, when I meet somebody good, within 10 days, I've placed them.
Mm.
And sometimes the one thing that's really good about recruiters is we have a high sense of urgency. We get shit done. Whereas sometimes with internal talent teams, because they're kind of guided by process, like you say, they're working across multiple different roles. Sometimes they lack that urgency, and then you end up missing out on candidates. A company that I'm recruiting for at the moment, it's a role in Singapore, which isn't my sweet spot, but I'm kind of giving it a go. And
Yeah.
they've got the internal recruiter working on it as well. And my client was like, yeah, they've screened 10 profiles, put 5 in my diary, but not for 3, not that the interviews aren't happening until 3 weeks, because apparently the candidates can't make it until 3 weeks time. Whereas a recruiter would be like, come on, you need to do the interview this week and like get it in the diary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
If
there's an
you don't have
urgency piece as
urgency
well.
to do the interview, then clearly you don't have urgency or interest in the role. That's
Yeah.
also my thinking.
Yeah.
Like, I'll always try my absolute best as a hiring manager to make my availability as soon as possible, to show that I'm also really keen
Yeah.
to speak to you as soon as I can, and that like this role is important for me to fill. And like I would hope that candidates would do the same thing. They'll also be happy
Yeah.
to like get an interview in as quick as possible, because then honestly, the quicker you get it down, the better for
Yeah.
everyone involved. So
Totally. And if the candidate is putting it off, it's always because they either don't want the job that much, or they are a bit naive and don't understand how it works, or they just lack urgency, which to me makes me feel like they're not going to be good at sales, because
Yeah.
they're not going to be quick to respond. They don't have that like instinct around getting things done quickly.
What I've taken away from kind of what you shared there was that by working with a recruiter, there are going to be companies that you get access to that wouldn't necessarily be available if you were just like hunting either on LinkedIn or Google. So I think that I think what me and Lauren have kind of said is it's finding a key balance across all areas. Like, continue to do a lot of your own self-sourcing, of course, but do get a couple of recruiters. I always have like a core group of people that I always kind of turn to whenever like a BDR is looking for a role or something like that. And just go and get people in your network like that, so that when you do want to go and job hunt, it's the same as like what me and Lauren would think about if we were going to hunt for a new BDR manager role. There's going to be a couple of people that we probably give a call to if we are on the move, that might know of some roles that are available and can represent us.
Every role I've ever had in sales has been through recruitment. It was not been from either like they've messaged me or I've reached out to recruiters, like every single one. I've never once got a job in sales via applying online. So I'm a big backer for recruitment. I'm like, I love you guys.
And I think one of the big challenges for junior candidates as well, that don't have the experience or the network, is that all of the job adverts look the same. Like VC backed, AI powered, hybrid London, world.
Great culture, everything.
And apart from
package, but no one ever says what the competitive package actually is.
uncapped commission, fast progression. So it's really difficult for them to differentiate between the opportunities and figure out which one should they actually apply for. I go on LinkedIn ads all the time just to see like how companies are positioning their opportunities. They're all written by ChatGPT. They're all just like loads of buzzwords that don't mean anything. Whereas if you work with a recruiter, that person can like get to know you and think, right, you're going to be right for this opportunity, this sales leader, match you better, rather than it just being down to like by chance which advert did your CV get through and did you get a response from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of benefits to it, that's for sure. Top tips. So if we break this probably question down into 2 parts, right? So we've got like getting ready to be interviewed. So that's from like CV to application to everything else. And then I'd love to get your kind of like top takes. It could be that. Top tips for when you're actually interviewing as well. So if we broke down the first part and then the second part.
Top tip for pre-interview is sort out your LinkedIn profile, because company like Lauren, I don't think you ever looked at any CVs.
No, I would never check. You message me someone's LinkedIn and I would go on their LinkedIn and I would message you and I'd be like, why have they got that on their LinkedIn? And you'd be like, oh, that's a really odd thing. And I'd be like, what the hell? But most of the time I'd be like, yeah, LinkedIn looks great. I can see they've put effort into it. big tick for me, 100%.
I've got a client at the moment that keeps asking me for the CV because he like thoroughly reads all of them, and I'm like, oh my God, this feels so old school. But because
Yeah.
most people don't, but sort out your LinkedIn profile. The biggest mistake people make on LinkedIn, which is going to feel very shallow, but it's really important, is your photo. People, especially junior people that have never really had like a proper job before, it's just them at a wedding because that's when they're in the smartest outfit they've got, crop. And I see this all the time, and it just doesn't make a good first impression. It doesn't make them feel like they're somebody that is ready to enter the world of like
Yeah.
being a proper professional. And the biggest thing companies are scared about when they're considering hiring junior people is like, are they actually ready to enter this world and like deal with customers? So invest in a good headshot or use a app like Facetune to make one. Advice I always give candidates is don't pigeonhole yourself on LinkedIn. So if you studied, I'll just use drama as an example. If you studied drama, if all your work experience is from jobs that you've done in the theatre, if your photo is you in a play, and if your banner is a picture of like your favourite play, and your tagline says drama student, looking for a new role, you just completely pigeonholing yourself. A company's going to click on that and just think this person needs to go and get a job in the
In drama.
theatre rather
Yeah.
than exactly. And I see that all the time. It doesn't matter if it can be anything. So you need to really think about like positioning yourself to look like you are ready for the world that you're trying to step into. So photo, banner, tagline, about me. The about me section is always just like a list of buzzwords that are substanceless fluff. You'll have seen this so many times. I'm
Yeah.
competitive, I'm a team player, I'm money motivated. Make it like, doesn't need to be long, but make it something that's actually interesting, that's going to make you stand out, that shows a bit of personality and talks about relevant skills or experience you've got to the job you're applying for. So that would be my before to get yourself interviews tip.
It's me and Lauren chatted about this because Lauren was telling her the situation with how you two work together as part of this, like the CVs and the LinkedIn's. And I was like, Lauren, I go through CVs, I go through every single applicant that ever comes in and applies for a role here, but I don't read the CV. My main thing is that they have their LinkedIn linked in their CV
Yeah.
so that I can look at their LinkedIn profile. But it's the same thing. Like I will always go to their LinkedIn, but my criteria, yes, having a nice picture and stuff like that is again super important. But I always say, if you haven't, again, it's a little bit self-centered, so bear with me. But it's the like if you haven't followed me, connected with me, or sent me a message, or even viewed my profile, which I hand go through and find out whether you have or not,
Yeah.
since the role's gone live, then you haven't actually done any research. You've just clicked apply and applied.
Mm.
So I go into a, does your profile look nice? That's a maybe pile. But if you've done form of research, then you move into a yes pile. And then anyone that doesn't have LinkedIn hyperlinked or they haven't done any action on it or it doesn't look nice, then they immediately go in a no pile. So I think it's super important. Like the LinkedIn, I think the way that younger generations are, when younger generations are becoming managers and stuff like that, that is kind of like our go-to now rather than CVs.
Yeah. And because they're going to be using LinkedIn to do their job, it's just
Yes,
evidence that that's going to be something that's not going to be like a whole new world for them.
100%.
So yeah, whenever I set up an interview, I send the candidate the interviewer's LinkedIn and say you need to add them, personalize the message. But before you do that, we need to fix your LinkedIn profile. And that also demonstrates to me how coachable they are. People that I know I'm going to place within 10 minutes of us having that conversation message me being like, I've made the changes. What do you think? People that just like don't bother doing it are people that I then don't end up representing.
I love that. Love that.
And then the second part of the question was in an interview.
Yeah, so we're getting prepped to go into maybe a first stage interview with me or Lauren.
Yeah.
What do people need to be doing?
God, there's so many. This could be a podcast in itself. So I'll try and keep it short and sweet. Executive presence is very important because you need to make a first, when companies interview you, they are thinking like, how do you come across? But they're also thinking, how are you going to come across to our customers? So if you don't have executive presence, they're not going to think that you're going to be able to like resonate and have credible conversations with senior decision makers within prospect accounts. So simple things like Zoom presence are really important. and again, this could be controversial because I know it's not that important to everyone, but I always think like dress to impress, don't show up looking scruffy and unprofessional. Make sure you've got a clean background behind you that doesn't look like you are like sat in your bedroom with like an unmade bed, or a clothes horse with clothes on it. You need to make sure your black background's blurred, that you look like you're in a professional environment, even if you're at home. I always advise candidates to get a headset because I think you're going to have better sound. I think it just looks more professional, makes you look more business ready. Make sure you've got like a good camera angle, good lighting, so that when the interviewer clicks on, they immediately think, right, this feels like a professional person that is ready to step into this world and is ready for business. Really important that you don't sound scripted. So many times I speak to candidates, I say, tell me a bit about yourself. And they tell me, and they're not reading off a script, but they're saying the exact same thing that they've said in every single interview that they've done. And I say to them, have you said those exact words before? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, right, I can tell. You need to memorize your key points, but make every time you say it sound like the first time you've said it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, companies are going to question your natural ability to just like have a conversation with a customer without sounding like a robot.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another massive thing is people always, and I've kind of said this about the About Me section on LinkedIn, but they always just list qualities about themselves that they think they are, and that just has no substance. So rather than giving me 10 different buzzwords, give me one and then give me an example of when you've demonstrated that. So like a problem that you faced, how you solved that problem and what the result was, why that demonstrates you've got that skill or attribute, and why that's relevant to sales. Prepare loads of questions because, as we know, being an SDR is all about being curious. We don't need to go on about that one because we all know that. But and sometimes I'll say to people, right, what questions are you going to ask them? And it's like, where do you see the company in 5 years' time? And I'm like, do you think that is a good question? Like, it's just so generic.
Question that comes up when you Google what question should I ask in an interview?
Yeah.
So I'm like, think of questions that you actually want to know the answer to that are going to make a tangible difference as to whether you accept this job or not.
By the way, what tend to be some of the top questions that you ask?
So, well,
Or you
again,
think someone should be asking?
and this is going to sound like a cop out, but I think it just needs to be a question that they actually want to know the answer to.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be like authentic. The worst thing is when you say, right, what questions have you got? And they open the page in their notebook where all the questions, like they're just the generic interview questions are written down. It's like I say to them, the interview should be a two-way conversation. You should be asking questions throughout because they're going to say things that are going to pique your interest naturally, and you should question that. But I think like questions about the role, the team, how to be as successful as possible, rather than just like very broad questions about the company.
Yeah. I've rejected candidates because of the questions they asked me.
Yeah.
I remember one person, like, they only asked me questions about the product, but they were like really odd questions. They were like, it was like, oh, how does the system do this and this? And I was like, I actually don't know. I was like, I haven't got a clue. I was like, I'm really sorry. Like, I don't work in the tech team. I was like, I've got no idea how they've built that. I was like, all I know is that it does this. But they had no questions for me on like, like, what am I going to do if this happens? Or like, oh, like, what's the biggest issue you've come across with the BDRs? Like, they had no questions for me at all about the team, the people, their career. And I was like, that's a no. Like, it felt like the questions they were asking me, they were trying to be different, and instead of just being authentic with what they wanted. So questions like I think.
And when people are trying too hard, that raises a bit of a question about emotional intelligence, which is then something that might make them not very successful in the role. So the more authentic the questions are, the better. And then the final thing is closing the interview. Whether the recruiters told them to do it or not, I think it is still really important that the candidate gets this instinct around getting a next step out of every conversation, because that's what they're going to have to do in the role. And candidates will say to me like, yeah, I closed. And I'm like, right, what did you say and what did they say? And they're like, I just thanked them for their time and they said they'll be in touch with me soon. And it's like, it's not closing. You have to, at first, I say to them, this is going to feel really unnatural and you're not going to want to do it. You're going to think, oh God, this is a bad idea. But it's really important to find out how has the conversation gone? What is the next step? And am I definitely through to the next round?
Yeah. It's the most important thing I think to be doing on an interview is closing it out. And those questions at the end tell a lot. I've always we've said this on I think probably episode 2 of this series. I'm probably 80% of what comes to me, because again, we're not going through a recruiter, no one's getting any coaching. It's just like a lot of raw people that have never done sales before. Almost like 80% of people don't close me. So I give feedback. My opportunity is, hey, can I give you some feedback? There's 3 points that you normally missed on an interview, one of which is always they didn't reach out to me before going into the meeting. And I say, you need to reach out to me afterwards. You didn't ask good enough questions and you didn't close. I then add those to the notes for the next manager. So if they don't do one of those points, they're not coachable, which means they get lowered down the list dramatically for not doing those. And the best candidates are the people that take those notes, are like, hey, can I just write those down? Yeah, write them down right there. Never miss those. And then that's also a great way to be getting that.
Mm-hmm.
Closing in on the end of this podcast, but I'm super keen to understand how you set up your own business. You moved out of London into sunny France. Tell us a bit about that.
So I moved to France in 2020, came on holiday after the first lockdown, and I had come to Nice like throughout my childhood, teenage years. So it wasn't like a totally new place, and I already knew some people here. Bumped into a girl that I'd known for like 15 years who was also from London, who'd decided to move here as well. And I was like, oh, so, are you on holiday? And she was like, no, I'm living here now. And I was like, oh, maybe I could do that as well. So I just kept, I'm such a sun worshipper. Like the weather makes a huge difference to me in terms of like my mindset, my mood, everything. From the minute I landed, I was like, especially because it was COVID and, lockdowns and everything, I was just like, oh God, when you just have a gut feeling where you're like, I really, really don't want to go back.
Mm.
So I just kept cancelling my flight home, managed to convince Venatrix to let me stay and become a remote worker, which was like a whole bureaucratic nightmare to do with like contracts and
Yeah.
living in France. And then tax was a big thing.
Oh, the tax man. He always makes things difficult, doesn't he?
Yeah. And then Brexit was happening. So it was like, if you want to stay, you
God,
have
yeah,
to
of
get
course.
a visa. You can't just like willy-nilly kind of like, dodge the system and just like keep extending your flights. So then I was like, right, I want to make this official. Got the visa and ended up having a baby,
Yay!
buying a flat here. Yeah, and then just honestly, like I've never looked back ever. I like miss London. I miss my friends, and I miss Nice is not like a B2B place at all. So
Mm.
you really have to be self-motivated. So I miss like the hustle and bustle and the buzz of London, but I would not change it for the world.
I mean, it's a lovely part of the world.
Yeah, it's a really amazing place to live.
Yeah.
What was that moment that made you go, okay, I think I'm going to try this on my own?
Honestly, it was when I had my baby, I went on maternity leave, and that was like the first time I'd ever taken a proper break from work. It, my old job was already kind of running its course because I was like the only remote worker. I'd massively hit a glass ceiling where there was like nowhere for me to go because I'd decided to move to a different country and everybody else was in London. And then genuinely, when I was on maternity leave, I was doing training sessions for Sales Impact Academy. I think you did them as well, didn't you, Lauren?
I
Or did you
didn't.
do it?
I think I
No.
did. I think Holly was trying to get me into doing some
Probably.
for
She
a
got me
long
into
period of
it.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There
I
you
was
go.
freelancing and making a bit of extra money while I was on mat leave and was just like, I really want to like be my own boss and be independent. And then it was something that I'd never like dreamed of starting my own business, but I think with moving to France it was the only thing I could have done,
Yeah.
because if I wanted to like challenge myself, be stimulated, make more money, benefit from the tax system here rather than lose out because of it.
Mm.
So yeah, and because of LinkedIn and the personal brand, the network, I kind of knew that I'd be able to make it work. So once the baby was full-time in crash, I was like, which is nursery, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go for it. And again, have never looked back. it's like the best decision I ever made.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a great place to probably end. But no, I think, Sophie, I think it's incredible what you've kind of built and the career that you've had. And I've really enjoyed this episode, learning from all like the top tips. I hope other people have learned a lot as well. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I love talking to you. I think you're very inspirational to a lot of people. So thanks for carving out the time.
Thank you very much.
That's it. So you know the drill. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe so that people that don't know us find us, because that's apparently what you have to do.
Yeah. And if you'd like to sponsor this podcast, please let us know. We'll say anything you want. Cool. Thanks, team. Bye. Bye.
Bye.